export quality. Everything's going to look good, even on a really slow computer. This just means you might have better performance with a GPU. Well, you will. The rest of these you can leave the same. The scratch disks, you want them to be same as project, same as project. Turn everything to same as project. Because Premiere Pro will be creating files in the background for you, automatic backup files, and it will cache things for you. So just leave all of this stuff where it is as the same project. Ingest settings, do not turn this on. This is only if you're working with proxies. Like I said, got a full tutorial on that. So I'm going to leave all of that, click OK, and now I'm in a blank project. If we go back to the folder, you'll see there's my project inside the My Show folder. Premiere Pro is going to create an auto backup. It does this automatically. But you should also turn on backup to the cloud. You're not backing up your media. You're backing up the project files, which aren't very big at all. In the Edit menu on Windows, the Premiere Pro menu on the Mac, Preferences, Autosave, and you can see I've got automatic save projects turned on. It automatically saves, and you can change this to however often you want. The maximum project versions, and save backup project to Creative Cloud. This is very useful. I don't want to turn that one on. I've got a tutorial here about why I don't turn that on. So now my stuff is going to be backed up here and in the cloud. Doesn't mean my media is messed up, but if something goes wrong with this project, remember we backed up the card. Where's my card? You backed up the card here and you backed up the card somewhere else. So at the very worst, you take, let's say I backed up my media here and I've got my project in the cloud and this computer blows up. No problem. I got a cloud recent version. I've got my media. I can recreate every single thing just by opening that project and pointing to this media. Very nice. Click OK. And the first time that Premiere Pro saves, it's going to save an auto backup. You'll see an automatic folder. All right, so let's look at the interface. The great thing about Adobe is that they have a lot of common conventions between applications. So if you've used something else like Photoshop or InDesign, there's a lot of similarities. There's a move tool, and there are panels and customization. So let's have a look at that. Each one of these is a panel. You'll see a blue line around something when you click on it. This is what is in focus. It is unbelievably important in Premiere Pro to understand what panel is selected. If you don't have the right panel selected, you won't have the right commands available. So keep an eye on the blue line. Every one of us, even longtime editors, have the wrong panel selected, but at least we know what to do. You go to export something out. Hey, how come? Crap, I gotta go select my timeline. Okay. Panels are also stacked up. So this list is actually multiple panels stacked up, one behind each other. And you can close any of these by clicking on the Hamburg menu and choosing Close Panel. If you accidentally make a mess and change things completely, up at the top you've got a bunch of workspaces. And the first workspace you'll probably see is this learning space. Editing is where you want to go to most of the time. If you've completely made a mess and let's say you moved this panel over here and it looks like a mess and oh my goodness, Premiere Pro looks like a mess, double click on the editing workspace and it resets. Now for me, I've turned off a dialog box. For you, when you double click on a workspace, it will ask you if you want to reset that workspace. There's also a checkbox there to tell Premiere Pro, don't ever show me that again. I know what I'm doing when I reset the workspace. So I can reset that workspace. It's always going to look like this, a nice familiar way to look. In the window menu, workspaces, you'll see again all of the workspaces you have. Now don't be confused by this one. This is one I made to emulate an iMovie kind of interface with very, very similar layout. But these workspaces are saved in here, and you can also add more, so you can save a new workspace, you can edit the workspaces, and you can turn this on. It's probably on by default. Import workspaces from projects. You may want this on or off. I always turn it off because I don't want someone else's workspaces in my copy of Premiere Pro. And that's what will happen if I open somebody else's workspace and they created a layout of whatever they want. Now I've got that in my project. I don't want that. So I turn that off. If you want that, turn it on. It is a good way to share a workspace with someone else. You can edit the workspaces, and here they are, and you can rename them. You can also move things down here to don't show. So I could move my iMovie one down here to not show, and now it's not going to show in that list at all. If you get to a certain amount, then you'll see a little pop-up menu in here. So that's where they exist. If this panel gets closed, again, you can double click on editing. It's going to reset that workspace. Okay. So what I tend to do is I turn off some panels that I don't need, like info, history. You might like this. I tend to know what the heck I did in the last little while, but history, and you can set how many things are in that list. History is a good thing to leave on for beginners. It will show you all the last operations that you have. I'm a pro. I'm turning it off. Markers will leave those up. You can reorder these by dragging them around, and something that happens quite often is the project tends to move around. So if you come back over here, this is the project panel, and you don't see where your project is, it probably got moved around. So I like to have it tucked over on the left-hand side. So each one of these has a specific job. This is where your media comes in, and this is where you edit your media, which we'll get to in the next section. But all of this stuff is customizable. If you go to the color workspace, you'll see a different workspace. If you go to effects and audio and graphics, Adobe's done a really good job of organizing the layout just for the stuff you need to do. So if you're editing graphics, go to the graphics workspace, because it's going to show you things like the essential graphics panel. All right, so here's some other conventions. One is this double arrow idea. Wherever you mouse in between something, you'll see double arrows. So you can resize things. So typically I'll leave everything where they are, but sometimes if my timeline has so many tracks in it, I need to see it, then I'll make that area larger. The same with the program monitor. You can make that very large, or you can make the source monitor large. And we'll show you what those panels are for in a minute. Now, while we're also talking about the interface and customization, back in the preferences, so again, in the edit menu on Windows, the Premiere Pro menu on Mac, we can go look at our preferences. And there are a ton of preferences in Premiere Pro. We're not going to go through all of them. I encourage you to poke around in here, but there are some things that are really useful. How do you want things to open, which we'll get into once we have some media in here. There's that workspace reset warning. I have that turned off. You can turn off that project loading error dialog box and the system compatibility issues. Again, you have an old computer with an old graphics card and an old driver, and you don't want to be bugged about it, turn that stuff off and just keep working. Doesn't mean you're going to be fast, but at least you won't be bothered by some dialog boxes. I also have turned this off, show project in bin. I don't want that name, so my stuff will just have the name of the bin. A bin is another name for a folder. You can call it a folder or a bin. I'll probably call it both things as I'm working on here. But you'll see each one of these has a different set of preferences, like how bright do you want the interface? How bright do you want the controls? There's audio settings in here, which we'll get into in audio. We already looked at audio save. Capture settings we don't use because we're not capturing from tape anymore. But there's lots of stuff in here. Media settings. And you can see down here I'm using my NVIDIA and my Intel card to speed things up. Media cache, which we'll get into at the end. Clearing a cache is something that you're going to have to get used to if you've got problems. Sync settings, timeline. So this, I think, is worth exploring. The timeline preferences. When we talk about transitions, video and audio transitions, you can set a default duration for those. You can have the mouse scrolling vertical or horizontal. So if you have a scroll mouse, or even if you have a trackpad with 2 fingers on, then you can set the scrolling of the timeline that when you scroll, it goes left and right or up and down. So sometimes you have so many tracks that you're not really going left and right. You just want to go up and down. So you can change that. Right now it's set on horizontal. You can snap the playhead in the timeline when snap is enabled. This might be something useful to new users. I don't like that because I like to freely move my timeline, and when I want it to snap, I hold the shift key and move that and it snaps, which we'll do in a bit. But you might want to turn that on and explore that. Okay. Now the last customization, again, is in the Edit menu or the Premiere Pro menu on the Mac, and that's keyboard shortcuts. And here you can map any kinds of shortcuts you want. Now this is really for beginners, so you're probably mostly going to go to menus and not use a lot of keyboard shortcuts, but I want to show you here that if you end up becoming more familiar with Premiere Pro, and there's an operation like duplicate doesn't have a keyboard shortcut, you could make a keyboard shortcut or enable something on and off. Okay. Now the last is the tools. We talked about the panels. We talked about these little menus. Oh yeah, there's also these wrenches, which you'll see everywhere for customization. But there's also the tools in here, and this is the Move tool. It's the same keyboard shortcut of Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator. It's the V key, and if you want to, if you're wondering how do you remember that, well, think of this: move with the V key. It's the Move tool. There are selection tools for track selecting. There are editing tools for ripple editing and rolling, ripple editing, rate stretch, razor blades, slip and slide tools, pen tool, hand tool, and type tool. We'll get through all of those, but this is this itself is a panel. So if I resize that, you see that changes. Again, you make a mess of things, you can reset that. So that's the Premiere Pro interface. It's fairly easy to understand that it's panel-based and things are in focus, and there's lots of little drop-down menus where you can customize things. So get used to that, and once you get more advanced, customize that as you see fit. You can turn a whole bunch of panels off if you want. I got a tutorial on how to make Premiere Pro simple, where I shut every panel off. I close every panel that isn't useful for an absolute beginner. But we are going to concentrate on the default interface that you're used to. I don't want to confuse matters. I think for brand new users, you should be looking at the way Premiere Pro comes out of the box. Whew. Okay, we haven't even started editing, but all of this is incredibly important. If you just try to jump into editing, you'll lose your media, or you'll close a panel and you'll not know why Premiere Pro looks the way it does. This is how I teach. It's not about pushing buttons, it's about why. I'm going to teach you why. So now you should feel confident about taking your card, making some folders, backing everything up, and opening up Premiere Pro and starting a project. Next, just as critical, is importing. All right, how are you doing so far? Okay, good. All right, let's talk about importing and media management. Probably the most confusing part of Premiere Pro, but we're going to make it very easy. There's one keyboard shortcut that I want you to get used to, and this is on North American keyboards. You can get to it. Again, you can go into the keyboard shortcuts if you're using a non-North American keyboard and find out where it is. It's maximizing a panel. Remember, we talked about the panels. One useful thing is to be able to take a panel that seems kind of small and temporarily make it very, very big, do something in there, and then make it back to the same size so it's not obscuring things. And that's the tilde key. It's the little squiggle key above the tab key. Whenever your mouse is over, and you don't have to click with the mouse, wherever your mouse is over, when you hit the tilde key, it makes it larger. So you'll see that down here. I'll move my mouse, tap the tilde key, tap it again, and it's the same as going to the little Hamburg menu and choosing maximize panel group. It's just a little bit easier. So that's going to be important when we're starting to work with a bunch of media. So a lot of people will drag and drop. Stop doing that. Remember I showed you that the card file had a whole bunch of folders in it? Well, drag and drop from your desktop, you're guaranteed going to break things if you do that. Premiere Pro uses a lot of extra information called metadata that's written into those folders and the structure of the files. So dragging and dropping, you might have been used to using that for many, many years, especially Mac users. For Premiere Pro, it is the worst habit that you have. It is bad. You need to break that habit. And don't use file import. That's also bad. Instead, use the media browser. Media browser is very intelligent. Remember I showed you the media encoder where it peeked into all of those folders and all you saw was the video files? It just said, don't even pay attention to those. Guess what the media browser does? The same thing. So if you are looking at your card that you've copied and you look at that AVCH